Again, let us go to something. This is what one of the articles read. Let me go to it. The headline, you can see it on your screen as we're talking. The headline states, intervention in Niger would mean declaration of war. Neighbors. This is from the neighbors of Niger. Burkina Faso and Mali have denounced the ECOWAS sanctions against the junta in Niamey. Why? Now, what is significant about this? What is significant about this? See, if you don't know the significance about this, you'll take the mainstream and the so-called alternative media's narrative without a second thought. What's the significance of that right there? Let me reread that because there's so much significance to that part right there that it needs to be reread. Intervention in Niger would mean declaration of war, according to Niger's neighbors. Which neighbors? Burkina Faso and Mali. Why? And who are they talking to? They have denounced the ECOWAS sanctions against the junta in Niamey. Now, let's read a little bit because we're going to address the significance of the title and the first sentence because it has everything to do with a play on resources and the recolonization of Africa. Okay? I mean, if your heart is weak, you don't want to listen to this because we're going to give truth out. And we know YouTube will probably take another 20, 30 subscribers after the show. Oh, yes. But listen, it says, in the first ever joint communique on Monday, the military governments in Mali and Burkina Faso warned the West and other African states against intervening in neighboring Niger. Bamako and Agagodu, I'm mispronouncing the last one, would consider such moves as an attack on their own country. Stop right there. Now, remember, I'm reading this article with you all for the first time. What's the significance about this? And why is the so-called organization of, and this is the Eastern countries of Africa, whatever, why are these people, not Eastern African, but this is an organization comprised of some African nations, but at the behest of European nations. Why are they so hell-bent on intervening in Niger? And what is the meaning about a military intervention in Niger? And why is it so vital for the West to intervene in Niger? All right? Let's go back to something because you missed something in the beginning. Remember I told you when you're dealing with this show and when you're dealing with me, we're going to provoke thought. We're going to make you think. We're not just going to dictate to you. We're going to analyze stuff, and we're going to force you to analyze stuff so that you can see the truth, so that nobody can come behind you and fool you after it, okay? So, intervention in Niger would mean declaration of war, according to Niger's neighbors. Which neighbors of Niger says this? Burkina Faso and Mali. Now, what's significant about this? Both Burkina Faso and Mali are former colonies of France, like Niger. They're former colonies of France. France used to steal all of the uranium, gold, and all of this stuff from Mali. They used to steal all of that from Burkina Faso and all of the resources. And then they would let their sisters from Europe and the West siphon off what they didn't siphon off to keep everybody happy. And what crumbs came down, they gave that to whoever they put in office in these nations. But Mali kicked France out. Burkina Faso did it. All right? And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Burkina Faso, if I'm not mistaken, is the first country. It could be another African country, but I believe they're the first country to kick the UN out. because the United States was using UN troops to destabilize and cause civil war in that nation. Okay, so it's something very significant. Let me see about this chair. There we are. There we are. All right. So, listen again. Let's read this together. It's very important we read this together. In the first ever joint communique on Monday, the military governments in Mali and Burkina Faso warned the West. Listen, here's the key. Here's a key sentence right there. Oh, my shoulder. Here's a key sentence right there. Warn the West. They warned the West first, and then they warned other African states second. Why? Why didn't they? Because this is Africa. Why didn't they first warn the African states and then warn the West? It is because this is a Western contraption, a connivance. And they're using their players in these different nations to try to bring pressure on Niger. Here's something that you did not know as I read this. According to statistics, Europe used to get a lot of its uranium and other minerals and ores from Russia. And since this war in Ukraine forced upon Russia by America and European nations, NATO or the EU, whichever one you want, the EU and the United States sanctioned Russian commodities. Russia refuses also to sell only up to a certain amount of commodities to the West. Okay, now the European Union used to get a huge amount of these commodities from Russia. They have nowhere else to turn. So Niger became the #1 bed for Europe to extract uranium, and France needs that uranium for their nuclear plants and for other applications. And other European Union nations need those resources in Niger. Okay? They're not telling you this. Niger became, I think, the #1 or #2 exporter of these commodities to the European Union since the tightening of the economic screws against Russia by the European Union. And so the president of Niger was Western friendly. He was getting his crumbs off the table while the people were not receiving the great benefit from the sale of these commodities to the West. So long as he was in power and could benefit in his corporations or his businesses benefited and his family benefited, everything was a-okay. So in the West, they're trying to present to you this man as a benevolent president, someone who the people of Niger love, but the people of Niger stands with the military. They stood with the military. But let's go further on this because this is very important. This is very important, and this goes to the crux of democracy. They say, well, the president was voted in democratically. That may be so. Viktor Yanukovych was voted in democratically. Why don't you have this much fervor for his reinstatement as president of Ukraine? Why is it that you have this much fervor for this president that was deposed by the military in Niger because the people were not receiving benefits from the resources that France, the European Union, and the US was extracting for pennies on the dollar? Huh? If we're talking about democracy, Yanukovych was the legitimate president of Ukraine, which the United States and the so-called EU, you know, those proponents of democracy worldwide, they deposed him and ignored the rule of democracy. But because they need the commodities coming out of Niger, and they need a pliant, a subdued leader that will pass policies to allow for the imposition of Western troops there. and Western corporations to extract minerals and resources and commodities with little to no oversight. This is the big brouhaha about what's going on in Nigeria. Well, let's go further.